If somebody had asked us 4 years ago, or told us that Julian and Myrtle would be speaking at a Crime Stoppers International Conference, we would never have believed. Hi, my name is Myrtle Clark, and I'm the Managing Director of Fields of Green for All, South Africa's first cannabis legalization non-profit company.
Hello there, my name is Julian Stoggs, and I'm the Director of Social Activism at Fields of Green for All, based in Johannesburg, South Africa. You may recognize that logo. 4 years ago, we became the Dagga couple. We, in the eyes of the law, are criminals. I, at the moment, am a criminal because for the past 35 years, I've used the cannabis plant and the illegal substances within it are in my bloodstream. In 2010, our story started. We had a very heavy-handed visit from the South African Police Service in our home in Johannesburg. A visit we will never forget it as long as we live. After a traumatic 5-hour experience in our lounge, we were subsequently charged and went to jail for the possession of cannabis with the intent to deal. We realized very soon that we had 3 choices. One of them, pay the bribe and make the docket go away, which is all too simple in South Africa, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid to say. Or we could plead guilty and we'd get a bribe, and we'd get a suspended sentence. We travel a lot, we're professional people. If we had a suspended sentence, we don't get a visa. If we sign the form to get a job and it says, have you got a felony? We'd have to say yes, we don't get the job. Third thing we could have done, and the third thing we did do, was contest the outdated South African cannabis laws.
So during the last 4 years, we've been preparing our case, and it will be held in the North Gauteng High Court during the next year. We've been amazingly supported by Schindler's attorneys of Johannesburg and our advocate, Advocate Robin Strachan Ford. The apex of our challenge is our human rights. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, whether you've ever had the police knocking down your door at 2 o'clock in the morning. We still get flashbacks. It is our right to privacy, it is our human right to use this plant. We're not harming anybody, we're not harming ourselves. If there's no victim, how can there be a crime? As our logo points out, we don't consider ourselves criminals, and neither do the other estimated 20 million cannabis users in South Africa.
We're not here to tell you about how brilliant this plant is because that would take all week. What we're here to tell you about is the harms of the prohibition of cannabis in South African society. After 100 years of prohibition, these policies, they've failed. It doesn't take long to realize how ineffectual these policies have been, because more people than ever before are using more recreational substances than ever before. You see, the rationale is if we get rid of all of these things, then nobody will do it. If we get rid of Dagga off the streets, nobody will use it. So-called dealers run the trade. They supply a demand. You arrest a dealer, there's another one over here to take the place because it's such a lucrative business. The risks of dealing inflate the price. The scarcity of Dagga inflates the price. The more the price inflates, the more automatic weapons are in the building. 50 years ago, Dagga was almost worthless. Because it's so sensationalized now, you've got automatic weapons on the streets of Cape Town controlling the market. It costs a fortune to buy Dagga on the street now, and it's because of prohibition. The only way to tackle a black market, in our view, is to make the product almost worthless. Regulate the market, and you know exactly who will be dealing the market.
So just to have a little look around the world, Uruguay took the bold step of legalizing cannabis across the board, and their new policies will go into effect early next year. With their system, cannabis is sold at $1 per gram. Ladies and gentlemen, cannabis can cost anything up to 200 rand a gram down the road right here in Cape Town. 200 rand a gram for a little piece of Dagga. Uruguay are going to the government is going to grow the cannabis in army bases, apparently, and they're going to sell it to the people at $1 a gram. You can imagine that the black market wouldn't like that very much. On the other end of the scale, in Colorado, one of the US states that has fully legalized cannabis, the sale of cannabis is very heavily taxed. This is very good for the state revenue services, but there's so much tax on it that the product is still more favorable to buy from the street. Much the same as illegal cigarettes in this country. You make them too expensive, tax them too much, then it goes on the underground. So here we have two legalization models on either spectrum of the scale. We've got Uruguay at $1 a gram. We've got Colorado very heavily taxing it, so it's really expensive. So here in South Africa, we really need to have this conversation because I'm sure that we can find a middle ground. Somewhere in between the two extremes, we can find a uniquely South African solution. Policing is about allocating time and resources. Everybody in this audience knows that. Time and resources are scarce. My mind goes back to the night that we were arrested. When we got to our local police station, we were interviewed by two senior policemen. Julian was taken into one room and I was taken into another room. The policeman sat me down and he said to me, "Stop wasting my time." He was very angry with me. He said, "I don't care about Dagga." He pointed to a file this thick on his desk. He said, "That's a serial rapist." I don't know if any of you heard about the Mill District serial rapist. It was going on for 2 to 3 years. He said, "I'm not interested in your Dagga. I'm interested in people who hurt other people." Enforcement of Dagga policy is taking up too much time and resources, but the most harmful aspect of all is that cannabis users in South Africa hate the police. And I use that word advisedly. It's not a very nice word. Dagga smokers in South Africa hate the police. And that, to me, in my heart, is a tragedy. It's a very big tragedy. We can't have our people of South Africa hating the police. We need the police. We like our police. We get on very well with our local station. They know us. Of course, now we've been cannabis activists for 4 years. They know us very well. But we can't convince all of our thousands of supporters that the police are all nice people and they're just doing their work. When you're walking down the street and you suddenly get a stop and frisk and you end up with a 14-year suspended sentence for 2 grams of Dagga. It doesn't endear you to the public, Mr. and Mrs. Policeman. It really doesn't. And this really bothers us. We need to have a good relationship between the people and the police, and cannabis prohibition is undermining this relationship.
You may remember last year President Zuma went to Eldorado Park outside Johannesburg and talked about cracking down on drugs. And at that point, Drug Watch started a blitz in Gauteng. And in 3 months, 23,000 recreational substance users were arrested. When you look at the statistics, fully 99% of them were low-level cannabis users. The Anti-Drug Alliance in Johannesburg extrapolated the cost to the state for those arrests. And those 23,000 people cost Gauteng legislature just short of 40 million rand to incarcerate them in police cells for the weekend. They only managed to get a reported 15 million rands worth of drugs off the street, which is neither here nor there. If we extrapolate those figures even further, and we list how much it costs to have an investigating officer, how much a cell costs, how much the fingerprints take, and everything else that goes on, we have worked out that if there was a national arrest rate of 7%, which we believe that is the case, then the figure to incarcerate 2,070 low-level drug users cost 240 odd million rand. That is 3 months in one province. It's out of control, ladies and gentlemen.
I'd like to just give you a minute to read what is up there. The DA asked the ANC for a report on drug-related arrests. Only 65 successful convictions had come from 127,400 drug arrests in Gauteng since 2011. That's one province, ladies and gentlemen. Prohibition of Dagga is the #1 breeding ground for corruption and extortion. From arrest to court, jail, to court, to jail, even the so-called diversion programs, harm reductions, they are all full of corrupt enforcers. You need to see our inbox, ladies and gentlemen. It's just too much temptation. It's much easier for a corrupt officer to take $200 than to actually put that person through the system for his little spliff that was in the ashtray of his car. There's no easier target anywhere on the street than a low-level cannabis user.
And for all of you out there that dream about waking up tomorrow morning and finding a drug-free world, it's not going to happen. It never did and it never will. Humans have been altering their consciousness since time began. They've been crushing pills, they've been crushing seeds, they've been eating things. We are all wired to alter our consciousness. You do it all the time, with coffee, with sugar, with alcohol, with tobacco. Dagga is a prolific plant. It's been here for over 700 years. 700 years. The Americans are talking about 150 years of use. 700 years. There's a reason why it's called weed as well. It is prolific. And there's no way any government anywhere on the planet will eradicate it. We've spent days walking through the high mountains of Swaziland. And when you get to the top of the hill after 5 hours and you zero in on those little emerald patches on the other side of the valley, there's tons and tons of the stuff. There are fields of green for all over. You'll never eradicate it. Stop trying. Again, 100 years of prohibition should make that plain to see. And you've got to realize that prohibition wasn't put in place because it was harmful. The real reason the first anti-Dagga laws were enacted in South Africa in 1878 was because white people came here and started manipulating everybody for their own ends and means. It's always been the poor that were marginalized due to prohibition, and they suffer to this day because of the injustices of prohibition. Dagga prohibition started here in 1908 by banning Hindu indentured laborers, slaves. The white man banned their sacraments. Dagga became illegal worldwide. That was 1908. It's 2014, ladies and gentlemen. The same laws are still in place.
You would think that the more dangerous the substance, the more control you would want over that substance. If you look at this table, which has the overall harms, the harms to an individual and the harms to society with the various substances. And this, by the way, is from Professor David Nutt, who's a world leader he's an expert in drugs harms. He's from the UK. There's no relationship between drug classification and harm. Worldwide drug laws concerning cannabis are not based on scientific evidence, so they are unjust when you apply them, because they don't appropriately penalize the harms of the drug. It will come as no surprise which substance tops this list. Every single officer in this building has been involved with an alcohol-induced incident. But most importantly, the current drug laws undermines people's confidence about what the government is telling them about the harms. If you tell people that cannabis is a Schedule I drug alongside heroin and man-drug and very harmful when everybody knows that it's not, then it devalues all the messages about drugs. Get the proportions right. Imagine the drug education in schools, and drug educators go and tell high school students that, oh no, Dagga is just as bad for you as man-drugs or tick. It's not true. And then those very teenagers go and they try the Dagga and they realize that they don't get addicted to it. They realize that it's not as bad as tick, and then they think, oh, well, I wonder if tick is not so bad. We just need to tell the truth about this plant.
Yeah. Reports of Dagga busts and seizures and drug hauls. It just reflects the amount of manpower that is being spent on what is perceived as this scourge when it isn't. Thousands of police officers around the country are wasting taxpayers' money and lining up with flak jackets on with a benign sack of Dagga. It's not that dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. There are people out there that hurt people. What are these about? I don't see a single story here about Niobe. I don't see any rapists. I don't see any child traffickers. All I see is bags of benign plant matter. And thousands of man-hours are spent on trying to eradicate this problem. On social media, it's as if the police, well, it's as if that's all the police do on social media. The successes of Drug Watch is snitch on your neighbour for Dagga. And judging by the amount of posts on social media, it's not even detective work. It's all tip-offs. These pictures were compiled from our Twitter feed over a 30-day period. It seems to us that there's just too much manpower allocated to Dagga, and in our view, excuse me, it's setting the police up for criticism. And it's not just Dagga users, people who don't use Dagga are criticising the waste of manpower. Why aren't you tackling the people that hurt people? Do you actually know how much medicine there is in this photograph? Have you any idea how many people's cancers could be healed from the amount of Dagga in those sacks? These kind of pictures have abated of late, and we'd like to think that we had something to do with it, because we complain vociferously about it, because it makes you look silly.
It's naive to think that legalization is the panacea or the silver bullet for the perceived problems created by cannabis use. But it could be the silver bullet for the problems built in with prohibition. If you think criminalization has a deterrent effect, it does not. And there's no evidence for it. That by banning Dagga, you're going to stop people from using Dagga. It's not going to happen. Drug use didn't increase in the Netherlands or Portugal, countries that have both decriminalized cannabis. If you compare Holland's 18% youth rate of cannabis use to the American youth rate of 44% for cannabis consumption, we think it's plain to see. If you take away the forbidden fruit, those misfits, those rogues, those rascals, those naughty kids, the rebels at school, who are into smoking joints just to piss their parents off, they're not going to do it. After 10 years of complete decriminalization of drugs in Portugal, addiction rates to harmful drugs have decreased over 50%. It's been 10 years in Portugal, and I'm sure everybody in this room has heard about the Portuguese model. And problem drug users are health subjects. They're not prison inmates. There's no point in putting a drug addict in jail. Incidentally, when the Swiss government decided to offer maintenance heroin doses to registered users, their housebreaking incidents dropped by 50%.
Many of you think that the legalization of Dagga will just mean a free-for-all. But we'd like to suggest that's really, really silly, because that's exactly what we have now. It is a free-for-all. Legalized regulation creates laws and controls. It enforces age restrictions, product quality. Quality controls are much the same as alcohol and tobacco that we live with in our lives at the moment. Substances that create far greater socio-economic harms than the Dagga plant ever will. Legal regulation doesn't mean being soft on crime. It's exactly the opposite. It's tough on crime, because it's the criminals that are being fueled by prohibition. Take the prohibition away, what are they going to do? And prohibition, of course, has proved time and again to be incredibly ineffective at stopping young people from getting hold of it. It's easier to get Dagga downtown than it is to get a bottle of brandy, I assure you. If you get a criminal record, we've just dealt with a problem in Cape Town 2 weeks ago in the Plum State Magistrates Court. There's a 21-year-old man. He had a joint in a roadblock in his ashtray. It weighed 0.6 of a gram. He was ill-equipped to deal with what happened next, because we believe it costs upwards of 20,000 rand to clear your name in a court. It'll take long. He got a 15-year suspended sentence for 0.6 of a gram. Do you think that's right? Does anybody in this room, could you look at yourself shaving in the morning and go, yeah, that's right, no, I believe that. Look at yourself in the mirror. Look in your heart. It's not right. That's what you've got to do. Drugs, including Dagga, they all have their dangers. That's why they need to be controlled. Standardize them. We want quality control, warnings on the pack, educate people properly. Why is legal regulation thought of as such a radical thing? It's in our lives all the time. It's prohibition that's the radical thing. Yeah. These are warnings from around the world. That one there is from America. That one there says, do not use this substance with alcohol. It's a fundamental thing for the Dagga plant. If you have 6 bottles of beer and you have a joint, it is chaos. But people don't know that. People aren't told that. It is chaos. But it's a really, really important piece of information that nobody knows. Thankfully, there are legalization models already in place around the world that we can all learn from. That is what happened in the 1920s in America. That didn't work either. Remember all those automatic weapons in the movies in the 1920s and 30s? All those boys? It was chaos as well. It doesn't work. Prohibition is wrong. This is what the Uruguayans think they're going to do with their model. You will see that anybody who wants to use the plant joins a register, a state register. The state own the Dagga. The state sell the Dagga for $1 a gram. There's no point there being a black market for $1 a gram. There isn't any profit in it. And the reason they're doing this is not because of usage by their population. Uruguay is a transport hub. It's in the middle of the continent, and all the drugs come this way to go that way. They're trying to stop dealers from entering their country because there's no point. 6 plants per adult. A maximum purchase of 40 grams a month. The health minister is in charge of it. And the same rules apply to any other normal modern society. No under 18s. If you drive a car under the influence, you're indeed dwang. No advertising of and no consumption in public places. These things are already happening all over the world. Everyone knows about the coffee shops in Holland. For 40 years, they've been running this story. They even tried to stop it 2 years ago with an ideological government. Guess what happened? The black market, it came back. Whoa, let's make the coffee shops legal again. Do you get the picture? In Barcelona, there are cannabis clubs popping up all over the place, and they're legal and they're sanctioned. 100 people can grow 900 plants. They don't leave the building. Money doesn't change hands. And people like us can find some safety in the fact that we can go to a building and talk to our friends using the cannabis plant.
Guys, you have to finish because time's really up.
Yeah.
20 minutes on this subject is
within
just...
18 minutes in.
We tried our best to get it down to 20 minutes.
Okay,
can I just finish?
yeah,
Thanks.
sure.
You know, we're not the enemies, but sometimes we feel like it. We've been honored to be asked to speak here at such an esteemed event. Somewhere between your policies and our views and our research and your research, we hope to build a dialogue for change. The present paradigm is not working, and we hope that we've demonstrated that to you in our talk today. Please stop arresting us. Please just stop it. We're sick of our inbox being full of people who are distressed by having their lives ruined by being arrested for Dagga. We're not the enemy, and neither is the Dagga. The benefits of this plant far outweigh the harms. All of South Africa stands to benefit from Fields of Green for All. If you'd like more information, please go to our 2 websites, or you can contact us directly if you have any questions. Thank you very much.